All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we are going to be doing a lunch and learn regarding surfaces. So designing with surfaces, trim, knit, thick, and repeat is just kind of the title that we threw up for it. Now, this isn't really going to be a full-on design with surfaces. This is going to be more of when you need to use surfacing, you understand the basics of surfaces so you can, get the job done when need be. I don't believe surfacing is one of those things that you just should model in all of the time. I think it's something that you really only use when you need it. So we'll talk about kind of the basics of everything, how everything works, and some things to note. So here's the agenda that we're going to be working with today. We're going to be talking about the differences between a solid and a surface, when to use surfaces, understanding the tools, and then using the tools. So kind of going through and actually showing a little bit of the demo here later on down the road. So a solid versus a surface, they are two different things. A solid is your enclosed geometry. We would typically consider that to be watertight. Surfaces are any sort of geometry that you have with no thickness. Now, visually looking at it, you'd think that it does have a thickness to it, but it actually does not. It is zero thickness surface, and you can kind of note those. So taking a look at the little image we have over there on the right hand side, the solid body is the blue portion and the surface is going to be the gray. And we'll talk about how to verify those or how to look at those as two different ways down the road. So when to use surfaces? Now, typically you'll kind of start using surfaces when your solid modeling has reached its limitations. Typically, I like to say, it's more along the lines of when a manual modeling is preferred. So with doing everything in solids, you got to have your closed geometry. You've got to make sure that everything is kind of fully defined and everything. Surfaces is more kind of going off the cuff, doing something that's definitely more manual, but you have there's a lot more degrees of freedom, right? So more degrees of freedom necessary. And then there is kind of times when the geometry needed lends itself better to be using surfaces. So depending on what you're doing, surfaces might just be a little bit better depending on the geometry. So if it's a little bit more freeform, that's when you're going to use it. I like to say, solid modeling is still the preferred modeling technique. So going through, I'm going to show all the surfacing stuff, but it's not necessarily okay once you get back to working that you're only going to be doing surfacing. I say no, solid modeling should still be the preferred method, but knowing a little bit about surfacing can go a long, long ways in when you might need it. So just some surfacing notables. Surfacing is a means to an end, so it is a reference. Kind of like how I talked about, you only use it when you need it. It's not something that you're actually going to be modeling with unless you really have to. Surfaces have double the faces, so they have a face on the top and the face on the bottom. So technically you have double the amount of faces, so it's more taxing on your graphics card. Also, the blue edges signify a gap or a non-knit edge. So taking a look at the cube I have over on the right-hand side, you can see that the front face and the right face are connected based on this little black edge through here, but the top surface is blue, signifies that these are either open or non-knit. So here at the top, you can see we do have a surface here, but it is non-knit. On the bottom, it might just be completely open or it's non-knit. So it's a way for you to determine if your surfaces are not lining up or anything like that. So we're going to be going through and talking about the different surfacing tools that we're going to be using today. So going through the list, so extending your surfaces, so going through and just obviously extending them, make them a little bit larger. Trim and untrim. I'm not going to show the untrim tool, but we'll talk about trim as we go through. We'll talk about using the filled surface command. We'll talk about using the planar surface. We'll also talk about offsetting surfaces, and offsetting goes along with copying the face. I'm also going to talk about delete face. Now, it's not really a surfacing tool, but it does lend itself well to working with surfaces. We're going to be talking about knit surface and then cut with surface. So let me go and hop into SolidWorks and we'll take a look at everything that we've got going on here. So first, I've got this part. We're going to take a look at it in just a second, but I want to go ahead and start a new part. Now, when I go through and I start a new sketch here on my top plane and I create a nice little closed geometry that we've got here, and we go to extrude this, this is what we do when we're creating a solid, right? So we've got a solid that we've created. It's a nice little box. What if I were to tell you that in the background, SolidWorks is technically doing surfacing for us? So let me go in and let's delete this extrude here, and we'll start off with this sketch. Now I'm going to go up into my surfacing tab, and we're going to go ahead and start off with a planar surface. Using that same exact sketch, we're going to go ahead and do an extruded surface off of that. I'll leave it at the default value here. And then we'll do a planar surface, and we'll right click and say select open loop. Now when we create a box, SolidWorks is going in and it's doing this exactly in the background. But you can see, you know, these side edges are close together, signified by the black edge, but the top and the bottom are still blue. So what we do here is we use our knit surface command, and we'll knit all of these together, and we have the ability to create solid. Right? So this is, you can tell that this takes a lot more steps. So this took 4 steps, whereas doing a traditional extrude is only 1. So like I said, you know, your surface modeling isn't going to be the preferred method. It's still going to be solid modeling. But what in the background, SolidWorks does surface modeling for you. So that's the approach of, okay, when I need to do something that's pushing the boundaries for solid modeling, that's where we get into surfacing, because you have the ability to do more steps. So I just wanted to kind of show this approach to say, hey, look, you know, you can do everything in surfacing that you can in solid, but solid, you know, you don't have the limitation or the freedom that you do inside of surfacing. Now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the delete face tool, because if I'm working with a solid and I need to get surfacing from that, I've got 2 different tools that we can talk about. I can use what's called the delete face, and if I turn it on delete, we'll go ahead and we have to delete a face to then create a surface. We now have a surface from that because we removed a face. If I undo that, we also have the ability to do an offset surface. If I change this value to 0, we now have copy surface. So I can go through and copy some of these, and I've created a couple surfaces and a couple solids. So let me hide my solid, and now I'm left with my surface. So if you have a solid model and you're trying to use surfacing from that, you have 2 options. You can either delete face to remove some of those faces out so you are working with a surface itself, or you can use the offset surface command and copy them over or do something like that. Now, let me get out of this and we'll kind of take a look at this other part here that I've got. This part here is an imported part, so it doesn't have any feature history or anything like that. But I want to go ahead and I want to remove this little top extrude at the top. So instead of going in and cutting this out, we do have a couple different options, right? I can do an offset surface here of 0. Right. Now let me hide my body, and we can use the untrim tool. We'll go ahead and select open loop. We'll untrim this in. In this case, it doesn't work. So the untrim tool might not be what we're looking for. Now, when it comes to doing surfaces, you know, surfacing one tool is not always going to be the best approach. So what we can do is, okay, we might go in and we're going to fill this in using a surface fill, and now we can go ahead and work on it otherwise. So what I want to point out to you here is that surfacing tools, we do have a lot of freedom with it, but they're not always going to be, one tool is not always going to be what you're going to need. So if the untrim tool doesn't work, then you have to go through and use your filled surface or a boundary or a loft. But that's the point of using surfacing, is because it's more of a manual approach. You know, you might have to use tools that would work on something that might not work on something, and it's all dependent on the geometry. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and say delete face. I'm going to turn on delete and patch. I'm going to select on these 3 faces here. And when I go ahead and click OK, you can see that it removes that face. So using that delete face command, by using the delete and patch, what it does is it takes the geometry that's already there and tries to patch everything together. So you can see in this case, this delete and patch worked out great. So using the delete face command is more than just deleting out a face. It has the ability to patch, and also within that delete face command there is the ability to delete and fill. So it deletes, and then the hole that you're left with, it uses the fill command to go in and fill everything together. So it does have some additional functionality in here other than just creating a surface from that. So I wanted to show that up front so you guys can see exactly that, technically you're using surfacing, but you're not really by using that delete face command. All right. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at some of these other parts that I've got here. Let's take a look at this one here. This is a good one. So this is a handle for an electronic carving knife that we've got, and this one section of it is open. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and close this off, and we can do it a number of different ways. We can use that filled surface command, right? If I right click on it and say select open loop, it kind of puts me in everything that I want. I can say, hey, look, let me merge my result and let's create a solid, right? So just that one tool can go in and fill everything in. And that's something that we couldn't necessarily do with a solid. We'll go ahead and let's remove this here. Now, if that filled surface isn't exactly what you're looking for, or it doesn't work out well, we do have other tools that can help us. We've got the loft surface and we've got the boundary surface. Now, being that this profile here essentially has I like to say four edges, or at least it's surrounded by four different profiles, the boundary surface works out well. So we've got this profile up here at the top, the matching one at the bottom, one on each side. So that gives us 4 total. Using a loft, that's typically when you get into something that's kind of has maybe just a couple, but a boundary is perfect for when you're using 4. So let me grab on my, we'll use these 2 faces here, and we'll boundary between the 2. I'm going to grab my selection manager here for the bottom section, and I'm going to select both of these edges here. And this will be a guide curve here, and then we're going to use another guide curve down here using my selection manager. So I have the ability to select on both of these edges and accept this in. And now we can go ahead and OK this, and we've got our boundary surface. Now, taking a look at the kind of the specifications or notables that we talked about earlier, we've got this open edge here. So we need to go ahead and we need to close this off. Using our knit surface command, I can do a nice little highlight here. In this case, it's picking up a couple extra surfaces that I don't need. Delete this out. We'll do a nice create solid. And look at that. We got a nice solid from that. So, being that we've got these surfacing tools, we have multiple different ways to do things. Now, if I take out that boundary surface that we just created, I can go ahead and I can use a loft in there as well. Let me do it in the opposite approach here. So we'll start at the top here. And we'll go down here at the bottom. We'll finish this off. And then in our guide curves, we're going to go ahead and use both of these like we did before. Right? And look at that. We still have similar geometry. So we have all of these different tools that can help us get to that desired end result. Go ahead and close down this model. And let's take a look at another one here. So bringing this model in, you can see that we've got some holes here, and this would lend itself well to a nice patch in here. So let me go ahead and we're going to do a filled surface. We'll right click on it and select open loop. This is one of my favorite tools. Inside of the fill surface, I'm going to apply to all edges, and I say, hey, look, I want to make a tangent relation or a tangent condition all the way across to all of these edges. We'll optimize the surface, and then if you can merge some of these faces together. So if you've got a whole bunch of faces in here that would be redundant, let's try and merge some of these together to get the best possible surface that we can with the minimal amount of faces. All right. So it brings that in, and it brings it in as 2, just based on the geometry that we're using. We can go ahead and go to the other side and do the same thing. Now I'm going to leave this on just a contact, and we'll see if it comes out any different. So you can see if we leave it on just a contact, it only leaves us with 1 face, whereas using that tangent end condition left us with 2 because of the geometry that presented itself. So we do have a whole bunch of functionality built into that filled surface tool. All right, let's take a look at some other tools here that we've got as well. I'm going to open up this part here. And this part, taking a look at it, this is a solid. And the reason why we know this is, let me go in and let me do my hide show tree items. And I want to show my solid bodies folder all the time, and I want to show my surface bodies folder all the time. So taking a look at our tree, we've got one solid and we've got no surfacing. But taking a look at this model here, we can see that, there was an issue wherever this was created. So you can see that there's a little like end face in here that doesn't work well. What we could do is start a sketch on that face, do a convert entities and cut up, but that's not necessarily what we want to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up into my offset surface. I'm going to grab on this surface here, or that face. We're going to specify 0. Using my tab key, I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And what we're going to do is we're going to extend this surface out. Right click on it, select our open loop, make a nice extendable surface. By using my shift tab, we'll bring that back, and then we'll do what we call a cut with surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that surface, and then any sort of solid geometry that's inside of it, it's going to cut out. The arrow is the side that it's going to cut. We want to flip that to the other side. I'm going to go ahead and specify OK here, and you can see that it cuts it out. Now we can go into our surface bodies folder, and we can go ahead and delete that body right out of here. So we kind of remove that right out, and we can do the same to the other side. Now I'm not going to worry about the other side since you just saw me do it, but it is a nice little approach to be able to say, hey, look, let me copy that surface. We'll kind of extend it out, and we'll get rid of it. Right? And using that cut with surface is extremely powerful. Now, we're going to take a look at a couple other tools that we've got here. So we've got this model here. This is just a model from one of our training manuals, and you can see it's got a small little lip here. And what we want to do is we want to transition from this lip kind of to back up in here a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to find a plane that I can start sketching on. Right? So I'm going to start sketching here. I'll go ahead and grab my line tool. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my line tool in here to get out. And we're going to go ahead and see if we can create a split line here. So using split line, this is a good way to break up, faces that we are going to use for surfacing. So using that split line, you can see that I cut this face into two different, and now I can use this edge for some surfacing tools that I want to work on. So I'm going to go up into my lofted surface. I'm going to go ahead and pick on this edge here and this bottom edge. Right? And if we want to do like a start end constraint in our start, we could say, hey, look, let's go tangent to this face. We get a little bit nicer of a condition here. Right? So we just had to flop over our face, and we've got this right here. So now that that's done, it looks pretty good. We could do technically like a cut with surface or something like that, but I'm going to use the replace face command. I want to say, hey, look, let me replace this face with this surface that we just created. Go ahead and click on OK, and there it is. Now let me go in and let me delete out my body because I don't need it anymore, but there we go. So if we didn't use surfacing in this approach here, we'd have to like create a plane somehow, do some sort of weird cut geometry, or kind of do a swept cut all the way to the bottom. I mean, we'd have to do something extremely weird or funky to be able to get that desired end result. So using this surfacing, I mean, you can kind of just say, hey, look, let me go from this edge to this other edge, and let's just look at the geometry that transitions between the two, and then we can use that to either replace face, cut with surface, or something to that extent. Now, let's see. Do I have any other models here that are going to work well for what we're doing? No. Let me take one last look. We've got one more model that I want to show you. So we bring this model in, and we take a look at our import diagnostics, and we've got a couple issues here. Let me attempt to heal all. And we've got one face that cannot be fixed. Let me do a zoom to selection here. All right, so this face in here is the one that's causing us issues. Let's take a look at it. This one cannot be fixed, so that's okay. We'll have to manually fix it on our own. Right. Taking a look at this face doesn't look too bad, but in our evaluate command, we've got some options to look at curvature. Okay, and there we go. We can kind of see that there's a small little, I'd say, hiccup or buckle in this this surface somehow. Yeah, that does look, ooh, that does look pretty good. So let's go ahead and turn off our curvature, and we'll go ahead and fix this. Now, to create this into a surface, what do? Right, we use our delete face command. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my delete face command. We'll keep this on delete, and we'll get rid of it. Now, I could try and do a delete and patch or a delete and fill, but that would kind of leave me with something very similar, and I wanted to show you the filled surface command. Now, in this case, we can go ahead and select our open loop, try and do something. Taking a look at our preview, you can see that this doesn't necessarily look really the way we want it. Yeah, this is even worse than what it was beforehand. Let's get out of here. Let's try maybe a loft. All right, so we'll go from this face or this edge to this edge, and then in our guide curves, we're going to go ahead and use this edge. Right. And you can see it gives us a little bit of a hiccup in here. Right, so not necessarily what we're trying to do in this case. We've got some good tools for, but what we've kind of determined is the fact that we've got some issues with these fillet faces in here, so we might need to readjust it. So taking a look at some of these, we can try and either measure them out to determine what our radius is. So in this case, it's just giving us arc length. So we might need to go in and use like our check surfaces or something like that to determine the fillet size that we want. But what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to use an offset surface. So we're going to go ahead and offset these three surfaces at 0. We're doing a copy, right? And let me go ahead and let me just hide these. Let me shift select, and we're going to hide these. And before I do anything else, we're going to do a delete face. Go ahead and delete, and we're going to delete all of these surfaces in here, along with this one. Let me show back these bodies that we were working on, right? And this is where we're going to kind of move things around here. So I can hide the original one. We're going to take a look at this guy real quick. So what we're essentially going to be doing is we're going to be extending these out in all different edges so that we can kind of trim it back together and fill it. So let's go ahead and let's do some extend surfacing, or extend surface, sorry, my bad. So we're going to extend this one. We're going to go ahead and extend the edges on this one here. We're going to go ahead and extend the edge over here. Right. So you can see this works out well. Now we need to go ahead and trim this guy away. So using our trim tool, I'm going to leave it on mutual here. Go ahead and select these two, and we have the ability to keep selections or remove. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do keep here. We're going to do a keep, and we're just going to pick on these two here. Go ahead and select on OK. Now we're going to do the same to this trim here. So we're going to select both of these. We're going to say keep, and we want to keep this guy and this guy. Go ahead and click OK. You can see it trims all of that together really, really nicely. So now what we can do is we can kind of bring back in this other surface that we've got, and let's knit these two together. We'll say create solids, merge them together, go ahead and click OK. You can see that it goes through, and we've created some geometry from that. So you can see we're missing a fillet that we have here, so we might need to kind of roll back in time a little bit. So let me just roll back here. And let's go in, throw in some fillets in here. So we're going to do 2.8. Whoops, sorry, my bad. We're going to do a variable size. Actually, we'll go back and we'll just do a constant here. We'll leave this on 2.8. Specify this as being okay. And now we'll knit these guys together. Right, so we essentially just fitted or fixed that face that was in there. Let's take a look at our curvature now. Right, and our curvature is exactly the way we want it to be. So in this case, what we did is we went in, copied those surfaces around the area that was a problem. We extended those out, trimmed them away, and then used the fillet tool to go in there and refillet those or recreate that geometry. So in this case, this was some geometry that necessarily couldn't be patched. Like we couldn't delete that face and patch it back together, but we could go in and say, hey, look, we're going to go in and fix it, but we're going to take a manual approach. Now to fix that using solids, I mean, you'd kind of have to cut out that section, then try and re-put it back together. So using surfacing an approach like this is going to be essentially your only approach to getting this done. Now, also taking a look at some of this other stuff that we've got going on here is we have the ability to remove some more things. So let me go ahead and use my delete here. Whoops, my bad. I'm going to go in and make sure I specify all of these faces in here, right? This is kind of like what we talked about earlier, using that potential for a delete and patch, right? So if I leave on a delete and patch, you can see that it patches everything together, right? What if for some reason that delete patch for some reason doesn't really work and we want to start with our delete face? You come over here, right? Now if you have any sort of hole inside of your model, hit delete on your keyboard and you have the ability to say, hey, look, let me delete that hole, right? So it's a good way to kind of remove these circle holes out of your model. Let me delete that hole. Look at that, gets rid of it. So we have this delete hole command that works out really, really well for what we're trying to do, right? Now, let's take a look over here. Let me do a delete face on this guy. And I'll just leave it at this for now, right? So say we try and do a delete hole, right? In this case, it's going to work, but for some reason it didn't work. So let me go ahead and let's just get rid of it, right? What we can do is if we wanted to fill this in, but we don't want this face in here, we could do a nice little fill, right? Merge result, click OK here. It goes through and it throws a fill surface in here. Now what we could potentially do is do a nice delete and patch. We'll get rid of that guy and it goes away. So if that delete hole didn't work, we can, okay, let me patch this in and then we'll do kind of a delete face, go ahead and get rid of it. So these, we kind of went through a whole bunch of manual surfacing techniques. Now, we didn't talk about any sort of geometry or any sort of kind of creating geometry with surfacing. It was more along the lines of fixing things. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, was the fact that, I'm pushing surfacing more for manual fixing, or if you really need to use surfacing, you'll know how to use it. But if you don't need to use surfacing, don't go out and physically start modeling using surfacing, because you don't need it. You can just use the solid approach, the solid modeling techniques to get you to that end result, and just use surface modeling when you really need to, especially in scenarios like this. Either you get a bad import, or there's some part of the geometry that you're not happy with and you need to modify it. So I thank you all for tuning in today for this lunch and learn on designing using surfacing. If you have any questions, I'm going to be hanging around in the webinar, and if you have any questions, just please let me know. Thank you and have a wonderful day.